This is the Cancer Interviews podcast, and I'm your host, Bruce Morton. Our guest on this episode has been through quite a lot. Vicki Wolf of West Palm Beach, Florida, has survived breast cancer no less than 4 times. Specifically, she survived ductal carcinoma in situ twice and invasive ductal carcinoma twice. She advocates for women diagnosed with breast cancer, but she sets herself apart in that she advocates for men diagnosed with the disease. She has quite a story to tell, and now's the time to hear it. So, Vicki, welcome to Cancer Interviews.
Thank you, Bruce. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm happy to speak with you.
And we look forward to hearing your story. Vicki, first thing we want to do is the same thing we do with all of our guests, and that is to learn a little bit about your life exclusive of cancer. So if you would, tell us a bit about where you're from, tell us a bit about your professional life, and what you like to do for fun.
Okay. Well, I'm a Philadelphia girl, Philly, New Jersey girl, really by heart. I only reside in West Palm the past couple of years, partially, and the rest of the time I'm back in New Jersey near the beach with my family. I have 3 beautiful, wonderful, amazing sons that are all married and each have provided me with the pleasure of 2 grandchildren each. So I have 6 beautiful grandchildren, 3 boys and 3 girls, and they all live and have remained in the Philadelphia area. So I have the pleasure of having them nearby and getting to see them often. My husband, Gary, we are approaching 45 years of marriage. So very blessed that way. And I have worked in our family business. My husband is a registered pharmacist. We created a chain of drugstores. And from that point on, we then sold the stores and opened up a health food store. Kind of our life and my breast cancer took us in that direction. So I'm very thankful for that opportunity. Our oldest son, Sam, joined us somewhat in the health food business by taking us to an e-commerce online business. So that was a great experience. And my other 2 sons joined the business as well. One is a naturopathic doctor, so he was able to guide and counsel in nutritional aspects. And my other son, Sean, was a vendor relations buyer and manufacturer relations. So that was great. We all had lunch together, and it was a lot of fun. And it was really a great opportunity to be with them. In my spare time, I play golf and have done so for quite some years. I also enjoy anything outdoors and beach and warm weather, and love to travel. My husband and I have had the opportunity to have some amazing trips. Some of them, I hate to say it, but after a cancer diagnosis, it makes you ramp things up a little bit more and realize that you got to do things today, not plan always for someday. And so while I was going through chemo, he actually planned a wonderful, fabulous month away in New Zealand and Australia, something on my bucket list. So we've had the pleasure of traveling to some unique places. Probably my favorite might be South Africa. That was awesome. So that's what I do. And other than that, I'm with my grandchildren as much as I can be, and they're the light of my life, and it's all great. I'm very blessed.
Now let's talk about your cancer journey, and there are quite a few steps to it. Oftentimes, Vicki, somebody diagnosed with cancer, they come to a point of juncture in which they notice something abnormal. They get seen by a healthcare professional. That eventually leads to the diagnosis. But in your case, what triggered your journey was your being proactive. Tell us about that.
Yes. So my aunt had been diagnosed with breast cancer. She was in her late 70s. And so at 35, I went for a baseline mammogram. Great. 2 years later, my mother was then diagnosed for me 2 years later, also in her later 70s, with breast cancer. Called my doctor to say, so by the way, my mom was just diagnosed. And they said, well, you're due for your mammogram. So at 37, I went for a mammogram, really not thinking much of it. My mother went with me. And when I walked out, she looked at me and she said, that took too long. What's wrong? I didn't even get out the doorway. So they thought they saw some suspicious calcifications. So we proceeded further, and sure enough, it was DCIS, so it was contained within the duct. We did a lumpectomy, had to do a second surgery because they didn't get clean margins. And I thought, I'm 37, and I kind of moved on with it. You know, my aunt and my mother were in their later 70s at diagnosis, so I didn't, wasn't really thinking too much about it. I continued with mammograms, and 2 years later, through a mammogram again, no symptoms, nothing to give me any advance warning. They again thought they saw something suspicious, and turned out to be again DCIS calcifications in the same breast, same area, however, different cellular makeup. So it wasn't something left over. It was actually a new cancer. So yeah, those were my first two diagnoses. Again, because at this point I was being closely monitored, and, mammograms every 6 months, and at a point mammograms and MRIs rotating on 6-month intervals. Third diagnosis was determined again by the mammogram. We looked, that unfortunately was a little more invasive, still found early because, we were keeping up with being proactive. So the third diagnosis was invasive ductal carcinoma. We did the lumpectomy. Radiation was recommended, so I did 30 treatments of radiation, was on tamoxifen, and that's when I also learned about the BRCA genetic testing. That was coming to fruition just about the same year. And found out I carry the BRCA2. So that ramped up a little bit more of our diagnostics at that point. I, again, was continuing with breast MRIs and mammograms, and the fourth diagnosis was actually found through the MRI. They thought they saw something. My oncologist at that time sent me for a mammogram and an ultrasound. It did not show up. They looked at me and said, I'm down to your rib cage. I don't see anything in the ultrasound. I had maybe a week of reprieve, and my oncologist decided, let's do another MRI, and just, if we don't see it, we move on. If we do, we'll biopsy. And unfortunately, during the MRI, they determined that they did still see what they thought they saw, and that's the fourth diagnosis of invasive breast cancer. At that point, I also needed chemotherapy, and of course determined that I should have double mastectomy.
By the way, we're confident you'll be able to learn some tips and tools to help you through your personal cancer journey. But first, we'd like to invite you to please give us a like, leave a comment and a review below, and share this story with your friends. Kindly click on the subscribe button below and click on the bell icon. That way you'll be notified the next time we release an interview. And if you or a loved one are facing a cancer diagnosis, please click in the description and show notes below to check out our free guide, The Top 10 Things I Wish I Knew When I First Got Cancer. And Vicki, let's talk about when you first got cancer, your first diagnosis. All of us are different in terms of our makeup, and each diagnosis is different in terms of its severity. So taking into account that equation, just what went through your mind? How did you react when you were hit with that first diagnosis?
Well, I was definitely surprised because I was only 37. So for that reason, I guess with my family history, we have a lot of cancer in our family. I always thought, especially after my aunt and my mother were both diagnosed, that yes, it's something I would have to deal with. I just didn't think it would be so early in my lifetime. I'm a glass half full kind of person. So for me, it was, all right, let's just get this out, move on, and I'll think about this again when I'm 70, The second diagnosis surprised me, 2 years later, to at 39 still to be young and have another breast cancer diagnosis. So at that point, it becomes a little more challenging, but, and I'm very health-minded. I eat healthy, I exercise, I'm within weight parameters, I think I was doing all the right things. And so, definitely surprised that I was so young to receive such a diagnosis.
Let's talk about the first type of cancer with which you were diagnosed, ductal carcinoma in situ. If you would describe some of the particulars that are part of such a diagnosis.
Well, it's a good diagnosis if we're going to, put it on a relative line, because it is still contained. So that means it has not gotten into your lymph nodes, into your system. So it's contained in the milk duct. Which is why we went ahead the first 2 times, especially with just the lumpectomies, feeling that we got what we needed, clean margins, and we could move on. So the first 2 diagnoses were a little bit easier to swallow.
And what were the medications that you took for those diagnoses?
There was no medication. It really was not at the first 2. It wasn't until it was more invasive that I proceeded. It was my own, I will say, how about not medication? But, I remember looking at my breast surgeon and saying, well, what can I do? There must be something I can do differently. I didn't know anything about the genetic mutation at that point. I didn't, I just was thinking there's got to be something I should be doing differently to have these 2 diagnoses at such a young age. And, the only answer I got back was, we're going to do a mammogram every 6 months. So I felt like I had to take it into my own control, and see what I wanted to do differently about that. And that's where my husband and I started to read up. All of my breast cancers are hormonal positive, ER, estrogen, and progesterone positive, meaning they're fed off of the hormones that we create in our body. So choosing things of organic foods where chickens, if I'm going to eat meat or eggs or milk, they don't, the animals aren't pumped up with extra hormones. So trying to limit the amount of excess hormones I'm receiving into my body. We looked at some supplements. Like I said, my husband and I went into the health and wellness business. We both continued our education as natural health, certified practitioners. And there, are some great supplements out there that can be helpful. I'm not going to say that they're going to, you're never going to get cancer if you take these, but, I do still believe even to this day, even with all 4 of my diagnoses, that what we put in our body and on our body does make a difference. How we process stress, how we deal with things makes a difference. And so I think adding some supplementation and changing a little bit of the diet, adding more exercise, doing whatever I could do, to improve on that was helpful. So maybe between my second diagnosis and my third, which was 10 years, maybe it only would have been 5 if I wasn't doing these things. I don't know, but it's the way I like to think that it helped. And I do believe they are helpful in some effect on how things go for you. So, so it really wasn't medication. It was really what I could do to kind of take things into my own control and how I was going to help myself.
Now, Vicki, you have mentioned your glass half full approach to a lot of things. So to some degree, I might already know the answer to this, but I want to hear your answer anyway. We go to the point in which you're between your second and third diagnosis, and now you're diagnosed with invasive ductal carcinoma. Mentally and emotionally, did this put you at a crossroads? In other words, now you have this tougher opponent. You might want to say, well, I've survived this twice already. I can survive again. Or do you think, Oh man, this is going to be really difficult. I've got this tough opponent. How did you approach that mental and emotional crossroads when you were hit with that more challenging, more severe diagnosis?
Um, I would be lying if I said that was easy. It definitely wasn't. There were uh, an, an array of emotions and confusion going through my head. Why is this happening? Why does this keep happening to me? Um, you think, is it something I did? Is it something I didn't do? And you kind of do checks and balances with your own life. Um, when it was suggested that I go to meet with an oncologist on that third diagnosis, because now it was, a little more invasive, to get an opinion. And I saw this pamphlet about genetic testing. I was at University of Pennsylvania and picked it up, and I thought, well, this is interesting. Maybe it's something not in my control 100%. And I honestly didn't think about the genetic testing for myself as much as I was thinking about it for my children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, that, maybe one day there'll be something, a vaccine, that this information will help them. So I think that's a lot of what got me through my third diagnosis. I went ahead, had the testing, found out the results that I carry the BRCA2, mutation. And just so if anybody understands this, everybody carries the BRCA gene. It's when there's a mutation in that link that creates the issue. And that can be for men or women. That can be passed down from a father or a mother to a son or a daughter. So I just felt that now I had this information at hand. The first thing that was recommended to me was to have a full hysterectomy. I'm 48. It's going to put me into menopause. Not fun, but it will lessen the estrogen being produced and the hormonal aspect of it, as well as remove the risk of ovarian cancer, which you are at a much higher risk of. And that's a harder one to detect earlier. So, that's the purpose of both reasons of having the hysterectomy completed. So I really thought between the lumpectomies, clean margins, radiation, hysterectomy. Now I've also was put on tamoxifen for 5 years to help reduce the development of further hormones. And I thought, I'm ahead of the game. And I live a healthy lifestyle. And I do all these wonderful other things, I'm ahead of the game. And at that point, the thought of going in for a mastectomy, after all that, I was done. I needed a little break, a little reprieve. I also felt that and this is not scientific, so I don't want anybody to think that this was just me and my gut and my brain. If I remove my breast, my body says make breast cancer. This genetic mutation says make breast cancer. And I remove my breast, my body still is going to make those cancer cells, and I don't know where to look for it. Where's it going to go? So at least I was continuing every 6 months with a breast MRI and a mammogram, and keeping a close watch. I won't say there wasn't scanxiety leading up to each of those 6-month exams and tests, but diagnostics, but you get through it, and then you take a breath and you get through the next 5.5 months and you start kind of over again. And it's always in your mind, but you got to push it to the back. I mean, you don't want it to control your life. I don't want breast cancer to control who I am or what I do. But I won't say there isn't a day that goes by that it's not or in the forefront, and then I'm thinking about it either when I wake up in the morning or when I lay my head down at night.
Now, you underwent chemotherapy with the third and fourth diagnoses. Is that correct?
Not the third, just radiation on the third. The oncologist determined with the oncotype testing, which my number was at an 18. It kind of came back at the middle ground of risk of recurrence is what they're testing. They're testing your tumor and seeing what the risk of recurrence is. And I was sort of middle ground, and we thought with the tamoxifen and the radiation, et cetera, they did not recommend chemotherapy for me. So unfortunately, at the fourth diagnosis, 10 years later in 2017, it was the end of December 2016, and then my surgeries, everything took place to 2017. And, I had the surgery, went in, I did the double mastectomy. We did plastic surgery-wise, we used my latissimus muscles in your back, kind of around your right below your shoulder blades. We used those as a flap surgery for me, reconstruction along with implants. I didn't have a lot of areas to take any other fat or tissue from, so that was the best option for me. I didn't even think about chemo. As educated as I was at this point, as much as I advocate and do, I just thought mastectomy, we're going to move on from this. And again, the oncotype test was completed, and this time it was much higher. I think I was 29. So my doctor called me and said, all right, we're going to need to do chemotherapy. And I was just shocked and kind of a little devastated because I'm so health-minded and health-oriented. The thoughts of putting something like that into my body was not an easy thing for me to accept. However, I will say with the education that my husband and I have, we were able to do a lot of counterbalancing, and we understood what we needed to do to keep me healthy and strong. And I think those things really helped. So I'm thankful for that. I did Taxotere and Cytoxin. And the hardest part for me was that was around the end of March when I was told that I would need that. And my third son was getting married the first weekend in May. And I was like, well, can we wait and start it after May, after my son's wedding? And my doctor, Dr. Domchek, was, no, I'm really sorry. We have to get this started quickly. So I had a beautiful wig for his wedding. That's all I can say. And I danced, and I was there, and I'm very thankful. That's all. I can't be upset or depressed or I was there, and I danced with my son at his wedding, and it was a great wig, so I looked great.
Well, that's one other thing I was going to ask you about. Some of the other things that are part and parcel of chemotherapy: hair loss, what food tastes like, your degree of fatigue. Could you just address those things in how they apply to you? Hair loss, taste of food, and your energy level.
Yeah, that's all the fun stuff of chemotherapy, unfortunately. My hair, it started to thin. I had longer hair. I cut it short in preparation, but that didn't last long. We only got a couple weeks, and I went and had my head shaved. I was actually a very moving experience. My husband was with me, and my hairdresser showed him how to do it, and he shaved my head. And one of my sons and daughter-in-law, my son Jeremy and his wife Melissa, came and joined me afterwards, and it was hard, but it was actually better than I thought it would be. I really just anticipated the worst, and what am I going to look like, and how am I going to be seen like this, and went out and bought a couple wigs, and which I didn't really wear that much. I just kind of went natural and let it be. It was summertime at that point, and so it's not fun, but this is what I decided when it came in. It was going to be short and natural and gray, and actually get compliments all the time. So I think in the end, maybe it wasn't so bad. Fatigue was definitely challenging, especially the fourth day. Always the fourth day after treatment was the hardest, and took me a couple treatments to learn that, but I realized that on Thursdays, I just didn't even open the shades to the windows. And I just accepted that that was my day and stayed in bed and did me and did what I needed to do just for me. I'm very blessed with a wonderful husband that's very supportive and caring. So he's emptied a lot of drains in his lifetime for me and taken care of, really helped me through all of these. So I have to say that's in my favor to have somebody. If you have somebody that's there for you, whether it's a friend or a spouse or a significant or a child, whatever, it helps you through it. I did have other symptoms that weren't so much so fun. I lost all the top layer of the skin on my palms. Skin was very tender and raw and just would peel off. Also on the bottoms of my feet. Lost a toenail at one point as well. It doesn't do a lot of pretty things for you, but you get through those. At least for me, it's like you have to take that with the other parts and know that, you're trying to do all that you can do to make yourself healthy again, and you hope it works. And that's unfortunately at this point, at this stage in the, where cancer is in the world, it's the best we've got, and so I think overall I fared fairly well. I kept active. I walked when I could walk. I did not, I'm not a woe is me type of person. So I just wasn't going to just lay in bed. And that's what I do. And my husband, he would look at me every morning and he would say to me, "What do you want to do today? Do you want to take a walk? Do you want to take a bike ride?" If I said, "I really don't have it in me today," he was good. But when he could, he would say, "Let's just do 15 minutes. Let's just go for a little stroll," And I think that's what you really need to do. If I could suggest anything to anybody going through this, that's what I would offer. Keep moving. When you have those down days, accept them, take them, and know that tomorrow could be a better day.
Our guest is Vicki Wolf of West Palm Beach, Florida, and South Jersey and Philadelphia. She has been diagnosed with breast cancer 4 times, and she survived breast cancer 4 times. And Vicki, when you think about that, when you look at this journey in total, is yours a feeling of strength? Is it a feeling of gratitude? Maybe a little of both, or maybe something else?
Definitely both. I think you have to have those. You have to use those and put them into your heart and soul and your mind, because I don't think it gets you anywhere to think otherwise. Do I say I'm out of the woods and I'll never have to deal with cancer again? I can only say, I hope not. And then I'm doing everything that I can do to prevent that. I do go for my colonoscopies. Because I have the BRCA2 mutation, unfortunately, I'm at higher risk for other cancers as well. None of that doesn't mean you will get them. It just means that I'm at a higher risk. And so because of that, we do other testing for pancreatic cancer. So I have endoscopy, either an endoscopy completed or an MRI of the organs completed. On a rotation, I get checked full body, body scans of the dermatologist twice a year for melanoma. You have to be aware. Don't assume because you have some pain in somewhere that, you may have strained something, but if it doesn't go away, don't not get it checked. I mean, that's the most important thing. Whatever it is, you can't assume, and you have to be your own advocate. And if it rears its head again, we will deal with it. I can only hope that it doesn't.
Vicki, we're going to wrap up now, but I want to cover a very important subject before we do, and that is a subject that pertains to your staunch advocacy for men diagnosed with breast cancer. And the whole notion of men being diagnosed with breast cancer, unfortunately, is hit very close to home because it involved your brother, Harvey Singer. If you would just talk about what you are doing and the message you would like to get out there.
Sure. So about a year and a half after my third diagnosis and finding out about the genetic mutation, which I shared, I have two brothers and shared that with them. I also have three sons. We all talked about this and what it could mean. I know Harvey heard me, but thought, breast cancer, I'm a guy, that's not something I have to worry about. Unfortunately, that isn't the case. Men have breast tissue. It develops just like every girl out there, but at puberty, it stops progressing. So there is breast tissue in every man, and they should be checked for self-breast exams or talking to their doctors about if they're at a higher risk or have a familial higher risk, or have genetic testing completed. Those are all things that a man has to think about. Unfortunately, it's not often talked about. So Harvey did call me one day and said, I have a little pain and a little something around the nipple area, and I'm going to go see my primary. Called me after that and said, he wants me to get a mammogram. Can I do that? How does a guy get a mammogram? Yes, men can get mammograms. So unfortunately, he was diagnosed with breast cancer. He did have a mastectomy. He does also carry the BRCA2 genetic mutation. With that, higher risk for a man is prostate cancer. So unfortunately, he also had that about a year and a half after the breast cancer. But the two of us, when he was diagnosed, and I could help him with a lot of the questions he would have, since I had been through it 3 times at that point. What was this test? How do they do this biopsy? What's a needle guided? What's this, But being a man diagnosed with what we'll say is a woman's disease in this world of pink, there is a lot of stigma that goes along with that. And it's not easy. And also a lot of the medical world doesn't always know yet how to deal with a man with breast cancer. What are the proper, procedures? He got an injection at one point in his treatments that he shouldn't have gotten. And he even inquired about it, asked about it. And afterwards got a call that evening and his doctor said, yeah, you shouldn't have gotten that. It's what we give to women. So, it's not an easy trail right now at this point, but it has improved. There is definitely, so we decided that we wanted to do something about this and help others. And he has 2 sons, and with my 3 sons, we wanted it to be different for them. So we have created our own nonprofit foundation. It's called HIS, H-I-S, His Breast Cancer Awareness. Hisbreastcancer.org is where you can find our website. A lot of great information. We're there for support. We're there for education. We also have a Facebook male breast cancer support group that you can find us by searching on Facebook for, just male breast cancer support. It's the his support group, and it's a place for you to ask questions, get answers, get some camaraderie. Other men, other women are on there who are helping their husbands or spouses or significants go through it, or sons. My sons, I have 2, I have a set of identical twins, and they both carry the BRCA mutation as well, unfortunately, and they all go for their baseline mammograms. Our children know to do their self-breast exams monthly, routinely, and, being aware is the first part. So if you're a woman out there listening, talk to the men in your life, teach them how to do a breast exam. It's the same way you do it. You can find out how, learn, and there's directions on our website. We have informative pamphlets and a great shop page, a lot of good swag that really helps with awareness. If you're wearing it, somebody's going to ask you about it. I guarantee it. And it's a great way to help support our organization as well. So we're doing what we can to at least hopefully help men know that they can be diagnosed and they're not alone with this diagnosis.
Vicki, and what's that web address one more time?
hisbreastcancer.org.
Okay, very simply stated. Vicki Wolf, thank you very much for your story. We've heard about how a lot has been thrown your way and you've overcome a lot. And that has to be of inspiration for anybody, male or female, with breast cancer or anybody with any type of diagnosis of cancer. Vicki, thanks very much for sharing your story with us on Cancer Interviews.
Thank you, Bruce. Appreciate it.
And we'll remind you, as we always do when we conclude, if you are in a cancer journey, you are not alone. There are people out there like Vicki. There are organizations like hisbreastcancer.org that are there to help. So until next time, we'll see you on down the road.